Hello friends, how's everybody doing? Rob coming at you on a Sunday afternoon, hoping you're all enjoying your weekend practice. Real quick, I just wanted to reach out and answer a question that I received from one of your fellow patrons, Oliver. He's been watching my new video breaking down how to play a jazz blues 12 bar and wants to understand the theory behind the passing chords and the substitutions. So I'm going to show you how it relates to the original typical 12 bar progression that you see in a common blues song and just try to help you understand the theory behind those techniques. Let's take a look. Okay, close look at the fretboard, taking a look at the first technique, which is using the lower neighbor and the upper neighbor for each of the chords in your blues progression to create passing chords. So this is a very, very simple technique. Basically, if you have a 1-4-5 progression in the key of A, for example, A, D, E, I can play those chords down one step or up one step in between the changes. So if I'm going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, I could play something like this. A 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1. So you see how I played the 4 chord up a half step? So I have my chord shape, I played it off of the 6th fret, D sharp 9 with this voice in, and then went to the 4 chord. So that's something that you hear in songs like Stormy Monday. It's a very classic blues trick. If you're going back to the 1 chord, you could do the same thing. Up a half step, or down a step. Sometimes it's played very quick like that. Okay, you can do it on the E7. Again for the 4 chord. Alright, all the way through that 1-4-5. So that's the first example of things that you can do to create that passing chord kind of idea in your blues progressions, using the upper neighbor and the lower neighbor. Okay, now taking a look at the second technique that I threw into the jazz blues version of my 12 bar. And that was throwing in a diminished passing chord from the 4 chord going back to the 1 chord. So in a typical blues, we would have the 4 chord for 2 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, before going back to the 1 chord for 2 measures. But we want to jazz that up, all right, make it a little bit more interesting. So we throw in the diminished passing chord. It's going to be a D sharp diminished chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So what's happening there? Well, basically what we're doing is just walking chromatically. The notes that are inside the chord are walking chromatically up to the notes that are inside of the A7 chord. Okay, so if I look at that diminished chord shape, and I take a look at what notes I have on the A string, the G string, and the B string, I'll notice that they are, in fact, just a half step down, lower neighbor again, from the notes that I'm going to find inside my A7 chord shape, which I'm playing here with my pinky on the B string 8th fret. That's that dominant 7 note, the note that makes it a 7 chord. Okay, so if I look back at the 4 chord now, I can see that there's a little bit of a melody that's occurring as I move through those chord shapes. Take a look at the B string. All right, there's the note that I'm playing when I'm holding the 4 chord. There's the note that I'm playing when I'm holding the diminished shape. And then here is the note that I'm playing when I hold the 7th chord. So that's a melody. That's a walk up. Okay, so you can look at all the different notes that are inside these chord shapes and you'll notice that they're just kind of walking up through their own individual places in the scale. But I think the best way to look at this is basically just looking at it like the lower neighbor again. Okay, just basically walking a half step up to that 1 chord, A dominant 7. Okay, very good everybody. Now you have a couple of techniques that you could use to jazz up your 12 bar blues. You've got those upper and lower neighbors to get to the 1, the 4. Let's try that again. You've got the diminished chord to get to the 1, 2, 3, 4, and A7. Now I want to break this down. Okay, so breaking down this third technique of swapping out the second measure of A7 for the C sharp minor 7 and this F sharp minor 7 flat 9 chord. So why are we playing this? Well, basically, it's more of an add-on than a substitution. They're taking a classic jazz chord progression and just slapping it on the end of a 12-bar blues. And that makes it sound so much more jazzy. So the classic jazz progression is 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it usually goes to the 1 chord to finish up, but in the major 7 chord form. Okay, so that's the really typical jazz chord progression. It's called a 3 or minor 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. Now, when you throw in that flat 9 on the 6th interval in the key of A, it's actually acting as an upper neighbor, just like we talked about before, for the common chord B minor 7. So that's why that particular chord form sounds so good, because we're utilizing that classic blues jazz technique of upper and lower neighbors as you shift or transition from one chord to the next. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this chord is a substitution for the 5 chord. Ordinarily we'd be going into the 5 chord here, but instead we played B minor 7. In my routine I played a walk up to the 5 chord from it. So this chord is a substitute. The way substitutes work is basically you find a chord that has a lot of the same notes in it, but maybe a different root, okay? So this B minor 7 chord, if you look at this chord and compare it to the E9 chord, has a lot of the same notes in it, right? We have, in both of these chords, I can play B minor 7, and I can play E9. They sound very similar to each other, so they work as substitutes. Okay? Even still, it is a part of that classic jazz progression. And did you know that you can also apply that flat 9 to the 5 chord, because it's upper neighbor for the note that's going to be in the final chord back to the 1 or the tonic. Okay, so that could be back to the 1. Okay, so that basically sums up the various techniques that I was using for passing chords and substitutions. Again, we have the lower, upper, neighbor to get to a specific chord. Okay, we've also got that diminished walk-up to get to the 1 chord from the 4 chord. And then lastly, combining 2 progressions. Okay, the minor 7 being added to the 3rd interval key of A. The 7th chord with the flat 9 being added to the 6th interval of the scale. All right, and then the B minor 7 acting as a substitute for the E or E9 chord, and also being used as a jump off point to create that walk to really whatever kind of E7 chord you like. E7, E augmented, E7 flat 9, whatever you like, will get you back to the 1 chord, A7, and there's so many ways of playing that chord as well. Okay, so the next thing that you'd want to do is see if you can change the key of this. That's one of the best things that you can do to really make sure that you have a technique down. Now, one of the things I recommend that you do first before you change the key is establish what the root notes are in terms of their interval in the progression, so that way you can easily visualize the scale as you're putting together these chord forms. So if you're looking again at the key of A, we had the 1, 2, 3, we had the 4, 2, 3, we went back to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, upper neighbor, 1, 2, 3, 4, diminished, 2, 3, and then back to 1, 2, 3, 4, we had 3, we had 6, we had 2, and then we had 5, before going back to the 1. Okay, and really when I practice playing just the bass notes, I try to use the fingers that I would have been using for the root notes for the chords. Okay, then once you feel like you have those scale notes visualized and memorized, then you can more easily change the key of the progression. So for example, key of C, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. My upper neighbor, 2, 3, diminished, 2, 3, back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and back to the 1 chord. Okay, keeping an eye on the bass notes of each of those chords as I go. It's a really, really important tip. Okay, friends, so there you have it, a theoretical explanation to some of those techniques that I included in that jazz blues chord progression. If you have questions, I'd love to hear them. I'm always happy to help. Just let me know in the comment section down below.